I'd like to call the special school board meeting for Tuesday, March 21st, 2023 for the Des Moines Public Schools to order. Ms. Rios, will you please take the roll?
Yes, Ms. Alonso Diaz,
Here.
Ms. Bradley,
Here.
Ms. Caldwell Johnson,
Here.
Ms. Knox, here, Ms. Martorano,
Here.
Ms. Norris,
Here.
Ms. Sawyer,
Here.
have quorum.
The first item of business is approval of the agenda. I would entertain a motion and a second to approve tonight's agenda.
Martorano, so moved.
Alonso, second.
We have a motion from Martorano and a second from Alonso to approve this evening's agenda. Please vote.
Alonso Diaz.
Motion passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda will be our special session action items. The first item is item B1, a resolution authorizing change of Des Moines Independent School District boundaries with Carlisle Community School District by concurrent action. I'll turn the matter over to Interim Superintendent Smith for an introduction.
I recommend that the board adopt a resolution authorizing a change of Des Moines Independent School District boundary with Carlisle Community School District by concurrent action as authorized by Iowa Code 274.37.
Is there a motion?
Martorano, so moved. Nora, second.
We have a motion from Martorano and a second from Norris. Is there any discussion or are there any questions? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is item B2, tentative agreement with Des Moines Independent Community School District to Des Moines Education Association Teachers Comprehensive Agreement dated February 20th, 2023. I'll ask the interim superintendent to introduce the matter.
I recommend the board approve the tentative agreement between DMPS and DMEA.
May I have a motion and a second to approve item B2?
Martorano, so moved. Nora, second.
We have a motion from Martorano and a second from Norris. Are there any questions or discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is item B3, tentative agreement between Des Moines Independent Community School District and Local 2048, American Federation of State, County and Municipal Employees Council 61, AFSCME, dated February 9th, 2023. I'll ask the superintendent to introduce the matter.
I recommend the board approve the tentative agreement between DMPS and AFSCME.
I would entertain a motion and a second to approve item B3.
Sawyer, so move.
We have a motion from Sawyer and a second from Bradley. Are there any board questions or discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion carries 7-0. The next item on our agenda is item number B4, personnel recommendations. I'll ask the interim superintendent to please introduce the matter.
I recommend the board approve the personnel list.
May I have a motion and a second to approve item B4, personnel recommendations?
Alonso, so moved.
Martorano, second.
We have a motion from Alonso and a second from Martorano. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, please vote. Item passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is item B5, upgrade to the Cisco network infrastructure. I'll ask the interim superintendent to please introduce the matter.
I recommend the board approve the infrastructure upgrade.
I would entertain a motion in a second to approve item B5, the upgrade to the Cisco network infrastructure.
Martorano, so moved.
Bradley, second. We have a motion from Martorano and a second from Bradley. Is there any board discussion or are there any questions? Hearing none, please vote. Item passes 7-0. The next item is item B6, Hoover Athletic Complex Connectivity Project. I'll ask the interim superintendent to introduce the matter.
I recommend the board approve the infrastructure upgrade.
I would entertain a motion and a second to approve item B6, the Hoover Athletic Complex Connectivity Project.
Martirano, so moved.
We have a motion from Martirano and a second from Bradley. Any discussion or board questions? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you for joining us this evening. We appreciate your participation. Our meeting is adjourned at 5:36 p.m., and we will move immediately into our budget work session. This, I believe, is our third work session, formal work session. We had some preliminary work done prior to the start of the year, but this is our third formal budget work session. And pending the outcome of tonight's discussion, we will have the opportunity, if necessary, to add a March 28th work session. But absent that, we would move to an April 4th certification and approval, followed by sending the budget to the state, I think, on April 17th, if I'm not mistaken. So with that, I will turn it over to Interim Superintendent Matt Smith and our CFO, Shashank Arora, for tonight's presentation.
Thank you. I just need a couple seconds to get set up. Shashank, are you going to drive the, thank you.
Okay. Not a problem.
Come on up, Ms. Tallman. Mr. Berger.
I was getting ready to say, I would be able to read it. I need a magnifying glass.
That's fine. Do you want the first few slides? Okay.
Just waiting on.
Oh, thank you.
You ready?
Yep,
Just gonna give me the sign. Okay.
sure.
Thank you guys for tonight. So we'll just kind of jump right in. Some of these first few slides you've seen before. There's just sort of a recap. So for tonight's agenda, we are going to talk a little bit briefly about, again, just the timeline and some of the requirements that we're all under. Terry just mentioned actually a couple of those dates. We'll do sort of a brief recap of the last two budget work sessions. And then we'll jump into some specific topics regarding the cost of doing business. And those are around activities and athletics, student and staff recruitment and retention. And then we'll wrap up the work session tonight, speaking a little bit about the legislative impact on the 2024 budget and the planning. In terms of the budget development timeline, just on that March 22nd, again, that's tomorrow, Shashank and I are scheduled to record another budget session, and then that will get posted and translated via YouTube. Thank you. And so we've been meeting with our department, our ELL department, and looking for the best way to actually make sure that we're getting it translated. And what we all sort of landed on was the industry standard right now is the translation on YouTube that would allow the most folks to engage in that conversation. So we'll record that via YouTube and then load that up and get that out tomorrow.
And that will have an advantage of being available in multiple languages, not just one or two languages.
Okay, one other quick question. I know at the end of our last budget discussion, we talked about making provisions for folks who either were unable to attend any of our 5 in-person sessions or our virtual session, the opportunity to advance questions. We made that available. Did we receive any?
No, we did not, Terry, not even one.
Okay, so there's certainly the possibility that folks who
Correct.
participate tomorrow may advance questions, but we don't have any other pending questions between our last discussion and tonight.
That is accurate.
Thank you.
So the next slide is just sort of just a quick recap again of the community budget conversations and some of the attendance that we've had at those meetings. Again, those questions have been answered and posted to date. The next slide is just a quick, just a reminder around the requirements for a budget adoption. And of course, our revenue plus our fund balance is going to have to be greater than or equal to annual expenditures. And then here soon in April, we will be working to approve a property tax rate. And of course, that is the general fund management, Pebble and Pearl levies. Again, just a few more recap slides here. This is the same slide that we presented in the last work session. There's no changes, just want to continue to lift up that cumulative impact of general fund expenses and major expenses in terms of goods and services, staff, and state aid tied to enrollment results in a $16.9 million deficit for us and for us to recoup. The 3% supplemental state aid from the legislature allows us to get 6.7% of that back, which leaves us about 10.2 million, and we've added $2 million for those unknown impacts. And again, those unknown impacts are becoming more known. That is specifically and primarily working with DMTRS and our DBM Fox Lawson study for our non-bargain employees. So we've earmarked $2 million for that. Thank you. You're already on that slide. Thank you, Shashank. And so we've already, if you look at our budget reductions, we've worked that down to the point where we're getting closer to that $12.2 million reduction target. We've got about 500,000 there that's still outstanding. There's still some more shifts and moves that we'll need to make here over the next weeks and couple months, but those are on track and on plan, and those are just going to be some staffing changes.
Hey, Matt, can I just recall at our last discussion, we also talked about the implementation of the DBM and/or DMTRS changes that are contained here as unknowns. I think you indicated that the plan is to move forward with implementation effective July 1.
That is correct. That is correct. And we have landed with an agreement with the MTRS, and so we're finalizing those things as some of those votes with that committee are taking place. We've taken some giant steps towards the DBM Fox Lawson study. We know where we are in terms of being able to apply a new methodology for principals and APs specifically. We have a larger group of non-bargain folks that were also looking for that methodology change. And then what's an aging of the scale to be correct in that term. So we'll be aging that salary scale moving forward. And so that'll be applied to the rest of the non-bargaining staff over here the next weeks and months as we finalize that.
Thank you.
Sure. And we do have a focus team of folks that are representative of all of those bands that are involved in that process, working that out.
Just a quick question, rough number of non-bargain staff? Just as-
400,
Thank you.
rough number, yes. Recap of February 7th. Again, just beginning with specific goal investments and the outputs and the anticipated outcomes of that. Looking to invest $9.1 million in FY24 specific to those categories articulated in the goal areas. March 7th, we talked a little bit about the investment in foundational tier and applied some specific $1 million investment in those particular foundational tier areas and those categories. I'm just kind of running through those because I know we've talked about them. So stop me if we need to go back to that. Just a reminder of the logic model that we're under, the inputs, the outputs, and of course the outcomes. And the outcomes are specifically lifted up in the interim goals and those interim guardrails. Again, the outputs are manifested in the levers model If you look at letters that was developed by our community several years ago, we're continuing to work towards making sure that our inputs are manifested and we're seeing changes in the outputs for our students, for our staff, and for our families. So, and I think that brings us, double checking the slide. You want to advance that for me? Perfect, thank you. We're going to talk a bit tonight specifically around just sort of the cost of doing business and some investments in FY24 as it relates to activities and athletics. I think we've had this conversation actually a lot at this particular board table around the importance and the significance of activities and athletics. So I don't feel like I need to actually emphasize that. We're also going to talk about recruitment and retention. We've also had that conversation at this board table as well. And so just to lift up a couple of aspects of what the research says in terms of effect size for athletics and activities, it's a 0.4 effect in quarter to Hattie. And again, it keeps kids engaged. It keeps them in a structured, safe environment. The longer we can have them, the better, because we want them in our presence as much as we can often and possible as we can have them. When it comes to recruitment and retention, again, the research is really, really clear. It can be upwards as up to $20,000 of a cost to a district to place a single teacher. And again, that's all the things. That's all the advertising, it's the marketing, it's the recruitment, it's the training, it's the time that staff puts into that. So that's not an insignificant number, considering when we are replacing specifically around for teachers, anywhere between 150 to 300 a year, depending on any given year. I'm pretty right on that. I mean, that's a pretty broad range, but I'm pretty correct on that, aren't I? Yes. Okay. And again, just to sort of bring it back to, we've got some categories around programs and staff, professional learning, capital projects, materials and equipment, and partner services, if you will, in terms of our categories that we'll talk about. Investments are going to take place. And then, of course, how that is associated and aligned to these outputs in our foundational tier. Just a quick reference to our guardrails. We'll lift up some of these and some of the metrics that we're looking to measure some of these inputs and these investments. And then we'll jump into sort of the meat of the conversation tonight, the investments in these specific areas. This is the overview. That is a lot of information on one single slide, but it's meant, of course, to give you a broader categories in these areas and the change in investment in FY24. One of the things that you're going to notice, and we'll talk some more about this, is if you look at FY23 investment at the total down there, you'll see $113 million investment total in these categories in these specific areas, as compared to $101 million investment for FY24. Significant difference. We're actually investing when you do actually going to be investing more dollars next year. I know it doesn't look like that here. It looks like that now is specifically as it relates to the retention bonus from ESSER dollars. It's $5 million this year, 5 million plus actually this school year. That will not be the case going into FY24 because we know that those funds are beginning to run out. And so that will not be the case here in these categories. And so that retention bonus for next year, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here coming up in some slides, is $1 million. So there's a $4 million plus difference in that regard. The other major change is the cost of the capital project in the stadium. That investment this school year is around $17 million. It'll be more of around $3 million for next year's budget. So that's the major difference in those changes. That's why you're seeing it's going to look in total that we're investing $12 million less in these categories. We're actually not. It's those two big bucket items is where that's actually primarily coming from.
Hey, Matt, would it be possible, and I don't know if you can do it tonight or if we could get this later, but one of the questions that's come up is we're sort of recognizing both general fund expenditures, Pebble, Pearl, Save, a variety of others in these numbers. Would it be possible to sort of pull those out so we have a better sense of which ones are general fund expenditures versus other levy or fund expenditures, just to create a bit better
We can do
and
that.
more clear picture?
Sure, you bet.
Yeah, and it's not expected tonight, but if we could get that, I think that would be really helpful.
I was actually going to see if Shashank could do that while we're sitting here at this table tonight and have all that figured out for us. But that's a great point, and we had talked about that, and we will absolutely tear that out for you.
Thank you.
Okay, to talk a little bit about athletics specifically. So if we look at investments in FY24, just for athletics in these various categories, again, just looking at the idea that we've got categories in programs and staff, professional learning, capital projects, equipment and supplies, and partner services or contracted services. We're looking at a total investment of about $16.49 million. What you'll find is we've added specifically, if you look at capital projects, some transportation. We are investing more in transportation just with our own staff, but also with our partnership with DART. But we're also looking to invest in vehicles, in vans, for our comprehensive high schools, make sure that, and some other programming, to make sure that we are prioritizing getting students where they need to be, specifically in a manner that allows us to be more efficient in our transportation and routing systems. And so we are working with all parties involved, all stakeholders, whether it be drivers, bus drivers who are also going to be bidding on some of these routes and these opportunities as well. This is also has to do with a lot of the cost associated with making sure that we've got folks with their MVR, is that the name of it?
Yes.
The motor vehicle record. Thank you, Sheila. To make sure that we've got folks that are licensed and have cleared all the checks and all the background requirements, so that we can offer a better service of transportation to get kids to and from activities.
You referenced that existing bus drivers have the option to bid on that. Is that something that will be made available to coaches, for instance, as an additional responsibility with additional income compensation?
Yeah. So now it's, we have not discussed yet with where the coaches would have an additional income or compensation beyond their current stipend to drive. Those are conversations that are ongoing right now, because we still have some details to work out specifically with our AFSCME partners around making sure that we have prioritized drivers, and we've done all the things that we need to do to make sure that they have the opportunities to drive these routes. So there's a lot of details to get into with our partners around this.
And to your point, it's less about compensation, more about just solving the immediate issue of students needing to be moved from one place to the other.
Absolutely. I will tell you, one of those challenges right now, though, is in terms of these vans, is finding them. And they're a hot commodity. And so we're earmarking dollars. And again, we're making plans and creating strategies to get that done. But I will tell you, and Dave, Phil, if I'm missing anything, it's hard to find these things. And so we may need to move our approach in terms of purchasing. Again, there's requirements that we'll have to go through, but perhaps there's partners in the community already that have some opportunities for us to actually leverage. So, again, some of that cost of that $16.49 million, $3 million of that is, again, just some FY24 cost to the stadium itself, and getting that across the finish line and making sure that we've got that venue ready to support our students and all the activities as in the fall as quickly as possible.
So Matt, in comparison, if you take the stadium out, are we moving the number at all from last year to this year in these categories? Or are they about the same?
It's a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah, in terms of our investment for next year, it's going to look skewed based on that stadium this year, right? But yeah, it's a little bit more of an investment next year.
Madam Chair, should we be asking our questions now, or should we be holding them?
Yeah, I think we're fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Matt, just a question around, and I know we've had this conversation a couple of different times around vision. So the athletic facilities plan was done. There was a report produced by Jeff Russell, Maria, and others participated in that. How and when will we start understanding the correlation of that to this? And maybe just a follow-up, if you could talk, a lot of this seems to be going to a centralized location, which is the community stadium. But if you could share how this is actually being dispersed amongst the existing high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools, that would be helpful.
So can
Sure.
I will interject. There is detail on this later in the presentation. So
perfect.
if you just let us get
Yep,
there, we
great.
should be able to answer it.
Sure. There we go. Activities. Similarly, when you look at the activities, and the next couple of slides speaks to this, there's a $2.98 million investment in activities for FY24. So I want to jump quickly to the next slide because that looks like there's a significant investment in athletics and a less significant investment in activities. And that's actually not the case. We've invested almost $15 million in the arts and activities infrastructure and projects over the last several years, over the last 2 years specifically, in upgrades to band and music and art rooms at all levels, the auditoriums. And so what you'll see in that specific investment, what we haven't done is made those kind of investments in the athletic facilities. And so what FY23 and FY24 representing are those investments in those specific athletic venues and those programs and that infrastructure. The arts and the activities and those aspects, the auditoriums, those received investments prior to FY23. So FY20, FY21, FY22. Did I miss something specifically about that, Dave?
No, I think you hit it.
Okay.
How do you reflect community investment? And I'm trying to think of examples, whether it's maybe both East and Roosevelt received external private donations and combined those with funding from DMPS. Is any of that reflected, or like when you think about the year ahead, are you anticipating any additional projects that were like the East and Roosevelt ones over the past 2 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's not reflected in these slides or in this particular budget development process. It needs to be and will be reflected in the future for the reasons that you've actually just lifted up and that Terry's lifted up around making sure that we are projecting where these dollars are coming from and what the contributions are, because so many of our projects, our capital projects, are a private-public funding partnership, and we want to continue to honor that and celebrate that and recognize that. And so that's an opportunity as we move forward to make sure that we've got processes in place so that is front and center and it is public-facing.
I'm not sure if this is a question for here, but how do we then, in that process, are you projecting for when those projects happen in a public-private partnership, what potentially will be future dollars required from the district to maintain, the
Sure.
integrity of those dollars and
Yes,
those
I'll give you,
investments?
thank you. I'll give you an example of what I think you're asking, what I think is also lifting up Jackie and Terry, your points as well, which is right now we are actually competitive with one another in our asks of private dollars, specifically at Prairie Meadows and at Polk County, to speak to two incredible partners with us. We haven't actually had a concerted district strategy around going to those partners and asking for larger private donations for our larger capital project opportunities moving forward. So working with, would you go to the next slide? Thank you. Working with the athletic facility advisory committees and the superintendent's facility advisory committee teams, bringing those folks actually together rather than having them meet separately to make sure that our 5-year facilities plan and our athletic facility advisory committee are coming together, which is representative of staff and community members and visitors, to talk about where we want Des Moines Public Schools investments in these larger dollar amounts to be. And so we're going to coordinate that we're getting larger asks to optimize our own dollars to move bigger projects forward district-wide. A $500 or $500,000 Prairie Meadows could potentially, as an example, go towards $100,000 a year towards turf fields. There's a growing and significant need for having more fields be turfed, so that we can get a longer season for students on those fields, with the lights, with a safe environment, and they have access to that year round, and it's not a field of mud or just torn up. If we strategically and coordinate our efforts to get that ask, as an example, for that 500,000, we could actually spend we can actually turf 5 fields in 10 years from now when we go to replace it. It pays for itself based on that investment from a Prairie Meadows, rather than us trying to figure that out now, and what we're going to do in 10 years, or how we're ever going to get that done for our kids and for our community. That's not on the table for us until now, around coordinating that effort. Is that answering your question? Because right now these are my words, we ask for small amounts in many respects, and it's not a coordinated effort. That will be coordinated moving forward. Part of the opportunity to coordinate that is to invest in an engagement coordinator position in DMPS to make sure that there is someone that is solely responsible around those public-private partnerships and looking to further that opportunity, to optimize and leverage those dollars for a longer gain for our students and for our community.
Someone answers it, but I'm thinking if there were a project done at one of our high schools, for example, and let's just say they replace a turf, right? And we raised the money, we did this turf, and Roosevelt's a great example. It's beautiful, but there will be ongoing needs for that turf. And so that then becomes the district to remember to put that into the budget at some point. And so, like, are there conversations around when these projects are taking place at whatever school? Like, what is going to be the long-term process to make sure that upgrades and maintenance and all that stuff is written into the budget, and that we're just aware of that?
Yeah,
from the
those
onset?
conversations are absolutely taking place, and around building that long-term strategic coordinated effort to get a maximize and optimize dollar amount for our long-standing partners, to make sure that we have a sustainability plan with the capital projects.
I might also just add, Kelly, because I think your question is spot on and something that we've been challenged by for a while. I love it when our community members go out and raise dollars to support facilities on our respective campuses. But when they do that, we inherit the project, but we don't inherit the dollars required to sustain it over the long term. So I think there's some discussion about sort of retooling our processes so that when we receive the dollars and when we receive the projects, it could be predicated on some very basic requirements that we set out as a district that might include an endowment to support those, so that we don't have to always sort of chase our tail to find the dollars to maintain the amazing gifts that we've received that may or may not be included in the budget. So it feels like there are lots of opportunities to expand those conversations. And I think that Matt and Dave and others are already beginning to sort of pursue some of those.
Yeah, and seeking advice from those that this is their expertise, this is what they do, and getting that guidance from them as well. Is all those things are happening right now. And I guess what I would continue to offer is that there are various foundations that exist at our high schools, and they're in some other form or fashion. We have a real opportunity to be a multiplier of those foundations, because they do great work and they raise lots of money for kids, and it's awesome. We could actually help them optimize those efforts if we have a district coordinated effort to bring in larger money, so that we can do the big capital projects together with that, and allow the foundations or the school-based foundations to do the other things that are closer to kids in the moment, and we can work through those things. There's a lot of details and a lot of planning that needs to go into that, but it's off and running, and it's a really unique opportunity for us moving forward.
I have a quick question. So what kind of investment are we talking about when we talk about a coordinator position? It sounds great. How does that impact our current budget? How soon would this begin to take place?
Yeah, we would look to implement this for July 1st. And so there's some purpose positions that are still happening right now. And for that would be one of those positions that we would look to have repurposed to get. We've got existing positions that we're repurposing for that.
Just one additional question. I know it takes time to move a big ship. So you have these two committees, you're trying to, kind of, this is the capital planning slide, bring them together in some form in 2024, develop the 5-year facility plan for 2026 through 2030. So what year are we on in the current, we're in year 3?
We're in year 3.
And is it, but there have been revisions because ESSER dollars, private dollars. So, and I'll just tell you where I'm going,
Yeah.
which is there are some, what we would say, some exacerbated inequities, you know, when you look at across the schools. And it feels, I guess I'm curious how those are going to be addressed, or will we find ourselves waiting until 2026 to have those conversations?
Yeah, we don't need to wait till 2026 to have those conversations. And so I think part of why we have 2026 articulated here is that it honors the work that those committees have done up to this point, while also bringing folks around the table moving forward to say what needs to change, what amendments do we need to make to ensure that we are equitable in our allocations of dollars and how we're actually funding schools moving forward. We've had conversations with specific high schools, and I've had some conversations with some specific middle schools around those perceived and real inequities in some respects. And we've got an opportunity to change that paradigm in FY24 while honoring what's been committed to through FY26.
Great, thank you.
And okay, so future facility planning on that same slide. Again, just bringing those folks around, just sort of wrapping that up, that while yes, this particular budget work session and what we've been talking about the last couple of months is about FY24, there are eyes on FY25 and FY26, knowing that these things are they're not disconnected. All of this is connected moving forward. If we look at the capital planning continued, what this has meant is just to sort of highlight that very conversation that we just had with some specific bulleted points and where some of those current investments are, how many of those were asset categories. And then again, looking at forward to what Terry just mentioned and articulated was that we've got some opportunities to be multiplier efforts. If we're coordinated again and we're bringing in public-private dollars high level and at a strategic level, we can create those endowments. We can create those district-wide programming opportunities for students and do so in a manner that is going to maximize and leverage the dollars that we're getting from our private donors. So that's what that's meant to represent. This slide, again, is just the process and just honoring and acknowledging that these conversations and these decisions don't happen with me and Shashank and Dave behind closed doors. It involves community. It involves staff input, student input. There is an iterative process that is involved in this, and we're going to continue to make that very public-facing around how we get involved in that. So there's some opportunities to revamp who can have a voice in that conversation and how we actually of the opportunities. I think also moving forward is branding, if you will, of how we're going to create private-public partnerships to fund facilities and programming for students and for families. We have an opportunity to rebrand how we bring voices into that conversation. And so the team and I are looking forward to that. The next slide is sort of that 2026 to 2030 sort of opportunity for us moving forward. This is, I'm recognizing that I've got 3 slides in here that are giving you some similar information, but maybe in a different design, just so that you know I really mean it. I'm sticking to it, right? So if there's three say the same thing, you know it's serious business. So, okay. So there you go there. Then,
Matt.
yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
Before we move forward, are there any additional questions on this particular section before we move to recruitment and retention? I really appreciate the detail that's been provided here. I think it really gives us a clear picture of sort of where is relative to not only facilities and capital projects, but activities and athletics. And it's articulated in ways that we haven't seen in a very long period of time. So I really do want to thank you for just being clear, not only about what our current investments are and what they'll look like, but also what the vision is moving forward.
Thank you. I'd be remiss if I didn't lift up a lot of folks, three that are sitting at the table, and so some in the audience as well too. But I've been able to connect with a lot of experts in these areas, community partners and business leaders, and so I am learning a lot from their strategy and their thinking and how they actually approach this work. And so you know who you are out there because I know you're watching tonight. So thank you. It's been helpful.
Any additional questions?
Just one
Jackie?
other clarifying question. There's, with the opening of the community stadium, that will shift dynamics. I think that was part of the articulated plan. At the same time, there was some discussion around whether or not existing facilities were safe and whether or not games and events would continue to take place. This is less of a budget topic, but maybe a topic for update at some point, because I still think there's a lot of questions around, like, how's it going to go the next couple of years with the opening of the community stadium and how that's going to impact maintenance and updating of existing home stadiums.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll bring that to you. I think that is a great actual question for this newly revamped and branded Facility Advisories Committee to do some reanalysis of those original plans.
Thanks.
I made note of that for future discussion.
Thank you. Moving into investments, I think we got by type, by staff recruitment. If you look at the total down there, we've got $2.44 million. I'm going to get my other chart here if I can see it. And as we talk about staff recruitment, there's some high level things. If you look at programs, I'll start there. For FY24, and then equipment, supplies, and providers. Again, some of those, the bulk of that, if you look at, is around programs and staffing. Incentives are in the actions and paraeducator grants. And I've got some dream ... because there are a number of build your own programs, and that's kind of what I wanted to lift up is looking at our historical data, recognizing our current, honestly, our current state climate, our current national climate. We are finding and actually being told by many folks that we look to recruit from outside the state that Iowa is no longer a destination. And I certainly don't say that as a broad brush generalization, because not everyone has made those statements to us, but those statements have been lifted up specifically and multiple times from recruits as we're out looking to bring folks into what we all know and believe to be the greatest district in Iowa. And that's becoming more and more challenging. It's always been a challenge in my 13 years in Iowa as being a part of this district in multiple roles to go outside of Iowa to bring folks in. We might be able to bring folks in, but retaining them is actually where we're looking to spend a lot of our dollars and repurpose our money to make sure that we are retaining the talent and the genius that is actually already in our district and already in our community. So that's where a lot of this actually is going to go in terms of staff retention and looking at some opportunities. We talked about how we might tease that out between recruitment and retention. some of the recruitment you'll see in terms of the millions is recruitment of our own staff into new positions in our district. But I was thinking and grappling about how to actually lift up that particular concept and that reality that the team and I are dealing with, which is folks are not looking to make that move right now. And again, that's just that is a very much a generalization, but it is a reality that we are facing and we are dealing with. So we are looking to invest those recruitment dollars with recruiting staff and community members and our parents and the folks that that already bring that brilliance to our community and make sure that our recruitment efforts stay actually more local. I hope I captured that well.
Just a real quick question, because obviously, college graduates are, a great recruitment tool too. Do we know percentage-wise, on an annualized basis, how many of our new hires, especially in teaching positions, are like fresh out of college, first year coming into the teaching position?
I'll let Susie, I know Susie's going to have some, probably a lot more specific answers than I do. I will give you a couple of, in terms of practicum students and student teachers. I can tell you that there were 58 student teachers in the fall of 2022, and we hired 24 of them already. And so that was a 50% sort of higher rate. There are 95 student teachers for second semester, and 15 have already been hired this year. And so that may not have answered Terry's specific question, but because that was more around student teachers. Something you want to add to that answer?
No, that's what I was going to highlight. I don't have how many have come from other colleges unless you do, Peter.
Last year, approximately, I want to say approximately 75 of the teachers that we hired were fresh out of college.
Yeah.
That's a raw number, not a big number.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and if you back up and look at that data more, and if you were looking at our surrounding colleges, currently when we're looking at, either the fall of 22 or spring of 23, we captured some data looking back at, how many new teachers are coming to us. And out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 surrounding colleges or universities, it's about 300 students. With their
Graduates.
graduate students with their teaching degree. But, some are specifically for special education, some are specifically secondary. So you break that down even more, and around us, we're really competing a lot with the surrounding districts because there's not a large pool of individuals that are graduating in education as we've seen in the past. And I think in the past, we've had maybe 150 student teachers each semester. So, Matt just mentioned what the numbers were, which are considerably lower. But if you go off of our data, we're hiring at least 50%, which is great because we're investing some time and we've done a lot of work to streamline our interview process and dump more time into student teachers than we previously had in the past.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're also seeing, again, correct me if I misspeak, please. We're seeing sort of a shift in where we're getting a lot of these student teachers and these practicum students, and it's actually becoming more out of the University of Iowa. I know we have great partnerships with Iowa State, UNI, Iowa, Drake, Grandview. We've got great partnerships, but we're seeing a lot more of a shift here lately where we're getting more and more students from the University of Iowa, which just means that we need to compete with those that are 2 hours away from us, right, in Iowa City. And so we're, again, when I talk about making that recruitment investment, we will continue to look at some opportunities to definitely get out and putting things out on LinkedIn, Career Builders, visiting our HBCUs, making sure that we do all those things. We will continue to do that. And we got to spend some dollars locally. We got to make sure that we're going to Iowa City and that we're going to UNI and Ames to make sure that we are in front of folks with some data around we are hiring 50% of the student teachers that come to us. And again, then it's about marketing and selling the benefits and the value and the joys of working in Des Moines public schools and serving this community and living in Des Moines.
I really appreciate the focus on retention. And to the comment that you just made about just the landscape that all of our teachers and staff are working in, are there other investments, whether it's in training or litigation support? I mean, I'm kind of like, how could you, what else could a school district do given the political landscape to ensure that educators feel as supported as possible? And you can think about that if you want, but it's.
Well, I will give you sort of at a strategic level, right, is if we look at staff retention, and you'll see that there's a $79, sort of $1 million price tag that comes with that investment as you're looking at all the things in terms of insurance, because we provide great benefits, and we got to make sure that folks know that and what that means to them, not only individually, but what it means to their families, what it means to their extended families. That's not an insignificant investment in the staff. Because they absolutely are worth it, and they put that time in, and they're committed to doing what's right for kids. So I want to make sure that we lift that up, because that's an important, not only marketing tool, that's an important retention tool to make sure that we continue to offer the best benefits to our employees. Because again, but I would also lift up being very strategic in our grow your own programs. I'm going to list off a few of them here, and I've got we can certainly send you the descriptions of these. We've got Dream to Teach, which is around student retention, right? We've got Dream to Technology, which is also around students getting involved in the career and tech fields, specifically in technology, cybersecurity, things like that that seem to be relevant for us. We've got the 3D Coalition that is specifically designed for increasing the number of high-quality teachers of color in our schools. We've got the Blue Contract, the Green Contract, the Associate to Teacher Pipeline. We're also working with you and I now, along with Drake, around a leadership pipeline to make sure that we've got principals ready and ready to go into to serve in that role. And so there's a lot of again, public and private partnerships with our local universities, and some significant investment of dollars and FTEs to make sure that we're giving folks not only support and training to feel confident and competent in what they're doing and to feel supported, but that we're giving them very clear career paths and opportunities. We know that just through our Gallup, results alone, that it's not just about belonging and a sense of connection to the organization, that the organization sees you and values you and celebrates you. It's also an organization that gives you a very clear career path and allows you to excel and move, wherever you would like to move in terms of your trajectory and where you want to be of service to students and families. So these programs are grow your own programs, knowing that we need to do that ourselves, and we need to do that with our employees and with our public and private partnerships through the regions. And so we've got some great opportunities that both Susie and Peter and the team, Theron and others are working with to make sure that we've got leadership pathways, we've got teacher pathways, we've got opportunities for folks to advance their career and feel that tangible support while we're recognizing and acknowledging their successes and their achievements.
On this slide here that we're looking at, this on the screen where it has remote workplace, can you speak more to that?
Yeah, that's since the pandemic. Thank you for that question. We know that we've got lots of positions that don't necessarily actually have to be physically present. And what we've discovered in our conversations when recruiting folks and trying to retain folks is we actually can offer you a remote work environment in some positions and still have you employed by DMPS. In some respects, actually in many respects, it's a cost savings to the district, but it's actually a convenience for the employee to be able to do their work remotely and still be a part of the MPS family. And so we lift that up because it's not every position. I can't work remotely. Principals can't work remotely. And so there's positions that's not going to be applicable, but where it is applicable and where it does make sense and it's logical, allows us to recruit folks highly talented to stay in those roles. We're absolutely offering that where it makes sense.
Can you tell me some of the positions that are?
Yeah, it would be our assessment department, our technology department. And then this year we expanded into other other departments, not the entire department, but there are some individual positions that lend itself a little bit better. Supervisors have identified, but for an entire department, it's been technology and assessment. And so we've been collecting data, different data points on that to ensure that, outcomes are being met, but also are the employees' needs being met? Are they being communicated well with? Do they, clear on what their expectations are and all of those things? So
Could you talk a little bit about affinity groups?
Sure, sure. So we've got affinity groups. Let me pull up that are about engaging and connecting with our employees who identify as Latinx, identify as Black, or identify as LGBTQ+. And so we offer those affinity groups as a support service and as a means to connect and stay engaged, not only with one another and with DMPS, but allows us to actually, as employees of DMPS, to connect with these employees so that we are not creating othering environments and that we are not creating environments where folks don't feel valued enough support. So we want to make sure that we're bringing folks together purposefully, and so that they can see other employees that identify as they do. What
we
did I miss
also
about
have
that?
Asian American Pacific
Mhm.
Islander.
Yeah.
So we have 4 affinity groups up and running.
Would you talk more about what you mean by up and running?
Meaning that we have staff that have been identified in order to lead those groups. Earlier in the school year, we had sent communication out to all employees, inviting them to join, giving them all of the information. And then Matt had mentioned Theron Hobbs. He specifically has been the individual responsible for making sure that those that are leading the affinity groups have, clear direction, know the purpose and the intent behind it, so that they feel well equipped to be able to help support and facilitate these groups, and then just having regular check-ins. And I talked to him the other day about it, and there's obviously things that have been learned along the way that will help us to make enhancements and improvements as we go forward. But so he's our person that helps provide ongoing support.
So these groups are groups that have been established already and are attended. They're listed as an investment. Professional learning. So these are groups that are available to teachers or staff in general?
All staff,
Okay.
anyone's welcome to attend.
So I'm curious about attendance. What would you say is the rate of attendance for those groups? Because you said that there's 4,
Correct.
right? And if we have them listed, I would assume that we have them listed because they are successful affinity groups, meaning we are being successful in the purpose of them.
Yeah, I think we originally started with groups that we know that we would have employees that would be willing to help facilitate, and also knowing maybe where we're not hearing all voices. Matt mentioned our LGBTQ affinity group was an area where we didn't have any representation, where we weren't getting employee voice. So that was one area where we started, along with some of the others.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to add to that is these are employee-led groups. There's a Theron Hobbs with the recruitment and retention office under Peter's supervision is the one that supports each of these groups and these facilitators to make sure that they're connected, because they also serve as an advisory. What can we be doing better, more of, less of, or differently than as an organization to be a better service to these employees, to make sure that we are retaining them. So I guess, I'm sorry. It's both. It's there's conversations with Darren for sure during contract time, but for the groups themselves, they meet after contract time.
Right.
The groups meet mostly after, beyond contract time. We meet in the evenings, sometimes district locations and sometimes off-site, depending on what the group has agreed upon, where they would like to meet. They exist because of the recognition of, in many spaces, many of these people are one of one or two of two in any given building, in any given department, and this provides them an opportunity to be able to come together in affinity to talk about what's going on and what's happening, be supportive of one another, get to see one another, and have the opportunity to recognize that there might be somebody that's down the street that you didn't know might be having going through some of the same things that you might be going through. And now you have a network or a connection to a person that you might not have known exists in our organization because you've only been that one-on-one in your current building. And so we're continuing to grow the affinity spaces, but we intentionally designed them to be employee-led, because once we enter into the conversations begin to change. And we did not want that. If the purpose of these is to be a retention activity, we need to be able to step back and step out and let them lead the learning and how they need it to be, and share with us what they need to share with us so that we can react and respond as we.
And just sort of add to that, that's why it's actually listed into the category of professional learning, because they're leaders of their own learning and informing us on what changes we need to make to orientation, onboarding, mentoring, induction, just our entire service model of the employees.
Mm-hmm. And so what we don't have happening, I think you said funds being, supporting it. Because we're learning, in this first year. But I think what has come out of that is we have some groups that want to be very active in some of the work that they're doing and the recommendations they're making. So we've talked about, if they're spending time outside of the contract day, can we compensate that in any way? And so not that anything has been finalized with that, but just recognizing the time that individuals are putting in and being able to acknowledge that and support it.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm just thinking of conversations with staff, teachers, and having very packed days during the day. And thank you for mentioning the beyond contract times, because we're expecting people to lead these groups, but don't necessarily get compensated for it.
No, the leaders do.
Yeah.
Leaders do, and people that attend is not considered training. They just attend beyond on their own time. Okay. So I've been hearing bringing voices to the table, and it sounds like we have a lot of things that we believe we have in place that benefit staff, benefit teachers, that benefit students. Yet we see people leaving. And so, I love hearing about the things that we're doing, but certainly there are things that we're not doing. And that's what I'm interested in hearing more about. I think that there is a lot of investment. And do you have any examples of perhaps contributions that you believe have been made by these specific groups that we've actually, things that we've actually implemented, things that we as a district have actually changed because of the attendance and organization really of these groups?
So I can say that the universal orientation is a manifestation of recommendations from members of several of these groups around folks saying, I'm in this job function and you're in this job function. I would love to have had an orientation that was like that. I would love to have been able to be a part of something like that. So even our universal orientation approach this year that we continue to evolve, and again, that Peter and Theron and team lead, that is an example of some recommendations that have come out of members of some of those affinity groups that says, how about this in terms of orienting staff differently to the district? Because I'm a sort of, I guess, I'll use the word ashamed to say, prior to this year, some folks didn't get an orientation. They didn't get an onboarding, and now it's universal. And so we are bringing that district spirit of you matter and your story matters, and each of you have participated in the universal rotation. So I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but that was an example of something that's been lifted up from members of some of these groups.
Would you share a little bit about the campaign that you have, recruitment campaign?
On the next page.
Are you on the?
Partners, where you have partners and
Yep.
service
Or
providers
on the
as
staff one, right?
actions,
Yeah.
under actions at the very bottom?
Yeah, you're on the recruitment slide, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you
so
talk about that, what that looks like, and kind of what you have in mind, and how that's going to be different from what we've done?
Well, so it's yes, it is still looking at investing in our marketing campaign for Strategic America, but doing so in a manner that is not just student specific, but also is staff specific. And a lot of that refers to our internal campaign, what we've learned this year, and what we're doing to recruit and retain folks internally in Des Moines. I wrote it down as someone was speaking a while ago, just encircled it on it. It's about internal communication. Our investment, and there's some slides coming up on this, in utilizing Strategic America, we've gotten lots of clicks, if you will, right? And so lots of visits to our sites based on that effort. And so there's a lot of good that has come out of that. The opportunity to move forward is to be very specific around the leadership pathways, as an example, that we've got built and that we're designing with leaders and with our private and public partnerships in our universities to communicate those pathways and those career opportunities to our own staff and to those in Des Moines Public Schools. I interact personally with folks who don't know that we have a 3D program, who don't know that we actually have a blue contract, who don't know that we have a green contract in our own staff of 5,000. And I say sometimes I believe that our messaging has been in abundance. And while it might have been in abundance, it's actually not clear, it's not resonating, and it's not actually hitting the mark with staff knowing what we offer them already and how we can actually have them in spaces to give input and inform how we can be better about this moving forward. So that recruitment, that campaign is an expansion and a targeted focus on internal communication to make sure that our staff knows exactly what we offer. They know exactly what we're actually here to build and how they can actually be a part of that, how they can apply for that, and how that actually is going to help support them and their individual desires to support students and families in Des Moines in whatever career path they choose.
So for several weeks, I've been thinking of this message that we send, that we have, that's now part of who we are as a district, right? Come here, become here. And when I think about what it is that we have in place for people to take advantage and grow, because everybody has the need to feel, everybody needs to feel like they can grow anywhere they go. And we have such, I think you said, geniuses in our district. And we attract them here. Perhaps we can bring them here. But we just seem to lack something. And that something prevents us from keeping them here. So I'm just wondering, what is it that people are feeling they're becoming here when they get here?
or do they become nothing and feel like nothing and they leave?
I agree. I think that's what this actually is meant to do, is to say, here's what we offer. Here's what we can do. What else could we do? That's what these affinity groups are about. That's what actually having these community conversations are about, is to say, how can we actually tangibly create an environment and a space where you feel heard, you feel valued, you know that you've got a career trajectory that you can stay with us. It's not a position that you go to and then you have to leave us in order to advance your career. You could advance your career right here. So when I list off things like where's my, there it goes. The 3D coalition, the blue and green contracts, the purple contract that's coming about in terms of leadership pathways. These are things that I'm guessing that folks at this table don't know much about them. And that's an internal communication problem, because we're not doing a good enough job right now of investing in our own folks to give them the information to know what the organization who hired them and loves them and cares about them can continue to offer them to stay with us. They don't know it. They are, we talk about student retention, which is coming up here too. I interact with families, I'm sure you do too, all the time around, I didn't know that you had programs like that. I know we need to do a better job of internal communication. We need to invest more in letting folks know all the pathways that we have for kids and the options and the opportunities. And even then it's not enough. And what else do you want? What else do you need in order to feel sustained and feel fulfilled and joyful about the experience that you're having? That's what actually this is all about, is making sure that we have a very strong and robust internal communication to our students and our staff and our families about all the amazing things that we have going on already. It doesn't mean that we're complete. It doesn't mean that we're there, but we got to start there. We got to let folks know exactly what we offer. And the reason why I say that is because otherwise every great idea that comes up, we try to fund it and sustain it, and then it goes nowhere. There's always going to be more great ideas than there is capacity to actually execute on. And part of execution is clarity of communication and a very strategic way of communicating to our staff and our students and our families about what we already offer, so that we know where it's not working and what we can change if they still don't choose it. If they know about it and they still don't choose it, now we got to talk about that. We got to talk about what we're not offering in those programs, or what's different that we can offer.
Maria, do you have another question?
No,
I don't want to cut you off.
no questions.
You've referenced internal communications a few times and investing in that. What does an investment in internal communication look like? Like what does that mean?
I think it looks like investing in our current websites, how we communicate to staff. Right now, we do it through School Connects and email and Teams and things like that, and getting a more cohesive plan about how we actually get that to staff. And it looks like contracted services, potentially, working with an expert on internal communication around how we actually move that forward. And it also looks like spending time and energy and money on pulling together what we have, so that it's not in different areas of the organization, so that everybody is fully immersed and understands all the programs and if we talk about staff, the pathways to a sustainable career in Des Moines Public Schools, where you're going to be seen and you're going to be promoted and you're going to be in that environment. Letting folks know that that is actually here. We have that here. And it can be better. How can it be better? So it's investing in bringing all that together to an internal communication plan that is articulated and that we are executing on, as opposed to reacting in a communication style.
So the plan is to invest not in a staff member, but probably in contracting out for support.
Looking for some contracted
other-
services of expertise.
Okay.
Yeah.
I noticed that. Can I ask another question? Sorry.
Absolutely.
Okay, so investment type, it says student recruitment and intention and retention. You've talked a lot about marketing being for employee retention. Did I skip ahead?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
you're on the next
Would you
slide.
advance the next slide, Shashank? Sorry.
Can I just make a comment before we go to the next slide? But DeWanna, go ahead.
No, I just want, before we go to that next slide, just out of curiosity, because And if you don't have the schedule in front of you, that's fine too. But when will we be talking about, or when will it be on our agenda for interim guardrail 3A and 3B? I just don't have it in front of me. I'm just wondering if that's an upcoming conversation, or have we already had that?
We
I don't
had
have
one
that
in
schedule in front of me.
October. We
I have
had
to go back and
the
look.
first one in October,
Okay.
Follow up on
like
that.
No,
October
I
3rd.
just, there's things I probably want to say, but it's probably better for that conversation. So just wanted to know when that upcoming conversation would be.
I'll pull the calendar and
Okay,
send it. Yep.
thank you.
So just one quick comment before we move to student recruitment and retention, which is probably our biggest uphill battle given everything that's happened at the legislature this year. But I think we need to level set on the recruitment and retention conversation, because if we were able to solve that in Des Moines Public Schools, we would be really, because people would be coming to us trying to figure out how we've done it. You know, this is a problem a challenge across all sectors right now. And to Susie's point, there are even fewer people coming into the field for us to even be able to attract. So I think what we need to focus on is not the negatives and maybe what we're not doing, but what we need to do to differentiate Des Moines Public Schools from any other district in this state. And how do we differentiate who we are, what we bring, and the value add that we would bring to anybody who comes to our district because of the rich resources we have, the access to leadership development, and all of the other things. So I want us to look at this from an assets perspective, because I think it's really important for us not to get down on ourselves, because again, this isn't, you know, our problem to manage alone. Everybody is dealing with this issue. So just wanted to sort of bring us back and allow us a little bit of space to really be thoughtful about where we have opportunity and how we create that space that differentiates us and attracts people to us.
I appreciate that point. Just maybe a question on the opportunity. So it's a really interesting conundrum. Fewer teachers, and you talked about people want to grow, right? So teachers want to grow. So what in a constrained environment, when there are fewer teachers coming in the pipeline, what are opportunities that teachers have to grow, but ideally stay in the classroom? And I'm just curious if other districts, you know, I know nothing but sabbaticals or, you know, a year out, 5 years in. Like, have you been thinking about that at all? Because ultimately, you both want teachers to grow, but you hate to see them leave the classroom.
Right. Yeah. And we have not discussed, you know, things like sabbaticals and things like that. It doesn't mean that we can't, for sure. You know, primarily how we've engaged in that conversation is how do we invest in staff members, you know, that job embedded investment through leadership experiences, right? Whether someone wants to be a PLC facilitator or an instructional coach. I'm missing one. There's another one too, but I can't remember what off the top of my head in terms of a leadership position. But and providing, you know, stipend compensation for that to help folks to know, hey, if this is if you want to, you know, dip your toes in that water, this is an opportunity that we can help you with to move in that direction. That's mostly where that conversation has landed. I think it's interesting to think through the lens of what's probably more of a private sector of the sabbatical.
We're just different, you know, rotational. It
Yeah.
really goes, I think, to Terry's point.
Yeah,
which
I think I'm
is,
probably
like,
more personally interested in that sabbatical
yeah.
thing as we're talking that out. But I think I think the concept of that is really interesting. And here's where I would go with that. Around residencies, right? So when we look at, we are in, we've done this before right into the pandemic in terms of having what we called internships, but there was a residency of aspiring principals in one AP, one principal to be in the position with a strong principal and another AP to support their growth and development. through a residency, if you will, program. So some of these investments in retention and leadership development are in the idea of residencies and internships to give that opportunity. What I appreciate is where we might extend our thinking beyond the leadership roles into other roles of potential residencies and apprenticeships and internships.
Matt, could I circle back to what Terry and Maria said as well? As we have built out our recruitment efforts and learned what, based on our data, what has been working and what hasn't been working, I think what it has highlighted is also the need to support our current employees. And building pathways is one way of doing that, so they see where they may have a pathway or a next step. But we also placed a heavy emphasis this year. Matt had mentioned universal orientation for all employees. And it's just not when they start, but it's something that's carried on throughout the entire year. And when you look at our Gallup data, it shows for our new teachers more highly engaged than other employee groups. Now, is it directly attributed to that? Could be, but we know that that's a new strategy, that we're using. We also have found through our data that our induction mentoring program has yielded a higher retention rate amongst our teachers. And so we are looking at how do we expand that to teachers that are new to the district, but maybe not new to the career, and provide a higher level of support. But I think as we've put a lot of these things in place based on what our data is showing us, but what we know research says is good, it's elevated or highlighted retention, and that we're getting some things in place. We have a 98% fill rate for our teaching positions, which is pretty good considering. However, we know in looking at our data, retention is, we're working on it, but is the next area really to be placing even a greater emphasis, because our data is telling us, and we've done some things to incorporate like exit interviews and stay interviews to begin even adding another layer of getting better information for our employees, like why do you stay, what's working well, what isn't working well, so we can add to our plan, design things more to better meet their needs, realizing that what has elevated from a lot of this recruitment work is we need to equally, place an emphasis with our retention work as well.
Any additional questions? Any additional questions before we move to student recruitment and retention? Okay, Matt?
So, there we go. On that slide, what you see is a $400,000 investment. But what is probably glaring on that document is where's all the other categories of investments for students? And that's where it becomes a little bit tricky. So in terms of investments in students, in terms of programming, and because as you know, we've got lots of programming that we offer students that it brings students back their interest, depending on their desire and where they want to go, whether it's performing arts, whether it's music, whether it's career in tech field. But if we bring that to a higher level, Shashank, if you would flip that slide. And actually, this is just in the current $200,000 plus investment, you'll get some of the specific and some of the click outcomes of that and how it website or to a specific program investigation or exploration through our website. So we track the analytics of that. And so that's what that slide is meant to represent. But if you go to the next one, Shashank. The reason why I wanted to emphasize the marketing and the campaigning, the specific and strategic marketing campaigning and a higher level investment for students, because when you look at these areas, these 5 areas that are lifted up in polls across the country, and so I've listed some of the resources of that. This is from Edutopia, but it's a compilation of 4 different polls that were given, and these were the themes that were drawn out nationally around what parents want for their children. in terms of their educational experience. And you'll see some of the top 5 responses nationally of what parents are asking for. They want to make sure that there's equitable funding, and that's part of, that the public-private partnerships, that's the state funding, things like that is what's represented there. Of course, academics. They want to make sure that their students are academically and cognitively challenged and prepared to jump into number 5, that post-secondary opportunity. They also want to make sure that students have career and technical education offerings to support and enhance their learning experience. Specifically because going back to, again, our internal communication and our own marketing to our own students and our own families, we don't do a good enough job of lifting up what we currently have, because we haven't actually created, until now, working on this now, a district-wide plan and vision for what we do in Des Moines Public Schools that no one else does. When you think about the career and tech opportunities and the post-secondary opportunities that we offer for in Des Moines, the number of national merit scholars, the number of students that are going on, to use an example, to the culinary arts school, no other district in Iowa offers those programs. Families don't know this. They don't know, they don't see the higher level career opportunities, because we're not actually doing a good job of communicating this to them in a very frequent and strategic and coordinated district level methodology. We've asked schools to piecemeal that information to get that to families as best they can, and we know what their day looks like, and that's not working for us. And so we need to invest more dollars in making sure that folks know that not only what do we offer here, but this is an example of I asked Tasha Brown, director of Central Campus, her permission just to share this draft sort of higher level vision of the difference between our current model of letting folks know that, yes, we absolutely offer all the electives, all the core classes that you would get anywhere else. We do that. And we also offer a higher level, more comprehensive set of course offerings that would actually give you access to post-secondary education if that's your desire, if that's what you would like to be. It also gives you career and technology access. You can jump right into a career out of Des Moines Public Schools with a certification, with an endorsement, in HVAC or electrical or plumbing, in the skilled trades. You can do it through culinary arts. There's so many different unique opportunities that so many of our students and our families have articulated that they just don't know about. And where this higher level, doubling down, if you will, of investment internally is not waiting until they get to their sophomore year to have this conversation. It's going to our students and our families in those primary years, and those K-5 years, in those early middle school years specifically, to make sure that we are inundating and saturating our families in what we offer and what we can do in service to them and with them and for them, because we have it, but we just don't communicate it well. And that's on us. That's on us at district office. We've asked schools and departments and programs to do that work. And now it's got to be aligned and coordinated, and it's got to come from central office, and it's got to come frequently, and it's actually got to be targeted at the elementary school levels. And the reason why I'm lifting up elementary and specifically in secondary is because we also have gotten some information from our demographic study. And that final report actually is coming yet probably this week, if not this week, then next week. But we got some draft data sent to us already right before the break. And it was clear as day that our opportunities in terms of retaining students is actually elementary and sixth grade. Those are the years. And we know the areas of the organization in terms of geographically of where we're losing those specific areas. And so our internal communication and our marketing and our investments in retaining students has to be specifically sent to those grade levels, those areas of the, of course, district-wide, but specifically targeting these areas of the district, because we've got heat maps and hotspots that let us know exactly where we're losing kids and at what grade level. And now we have an opportunity to actually go to families and say, why? Why would you choose something else? Did you know that we can do this? What else would you like us to do? And so this has given us a real opportunity to double down our internal campaigning and our internal communication around what we currently offer. And I may have said it already again. there's no doubt that there are things that we are not doing as a district. There's no doubt about that, that we could be doing. I also know that there are things that we are currently doing that we are just not communicating well, and that students and families will stay if they know that this opportunity is here with them. Because as many families as I know that say, I didn't know that we had that, I also interact with families that say, I wish I had knew that before I chose something different, and now I want to come back. I've had those conversations with families as well. And so that's what this specific investment in student retention is about, is targeting students at those various grade levels and then geographically of where we know the heat map is telling us that we're losing students and we're losing families, and making sure that they know that when you stay with us, not only will you be loved and cared for, and we believe in SEL and we believe in making sure that you know your value and you know your worth and you know that you are actually loved here, but you can also get a really rigorous academic experience, and you're going to get access to post-secondary opportunities that you will not get in any other district in Iowa.
First of all, I really appreciate the focus on this and your passion. It's actually really great to see, Matt. What would be, when you think about K through 5 or 6th grade, what's the infrastructure and training and or knowledge, like what do you need in the building itself, right? So you've got messages being sent, but then it still is that navigation of student to opportunity. And is that whose job is that, right? So the building specific, I'm just wondering how that plays itself out in terms of
Absolutely. So we
implementation.
actually have and the reason why it says Future Ready on there, we have a Future Ready team that actually is building out all the things around what's the programming look like? What does exploration look like at the K-5 level? How might we actually get that in the hands of teachers? How might we get that in the hands of sure that we are communicating this? You know, what does that look like on websites? How universal does that look on websites in terms of Snap Connects? What might that messaging be? So that team is working on building that out. Again, very specifically through a K-5 and a middle school recruitment and marketing plan.
Yes, Ms. Bradley?
Just a question on this, this where it says research says parents want from schools. Would this information change post-COVID? I know this is from like 2017, but just wondering if we've talked to parents and seen if there's been a shift in that now that we're post-COVID. Are these the same things that they're wanting to see?
Hit and miss, yes. A lot of what we talked about parents right now are just sort of the relevancy of some of the, safety, things like that, that we know have been a topic of conversation over the last couple of years. And so there's an opportunity moving forward to continue to reach out to families and parents around these specific topics. And are these the things that you also believe in? Because you're correct, this is from 2017, and these are national polls. These are, not Des Moines specific.
You want to go ahead? Are there any other strategies that you're maybe considering investing in to retain students outside of this marketing campaign? I mean, I feel like we've talked a little bit about how part of that's external of trying to address enrollment and retention. But I'm thinking also, and you said some of it's the internal communication piece, but I'm just curious about any other dollars related to retaining students that would be like specific positions or specific dollars into buildings so that they can build stronger community, any specific things?
Well, no, we haven't in terms of something that would be unique or different from community school coordinators and some of those positions that are built to engage students and families, not only in the building, but also just in the community partnerships. So we haven't talked about necessarily specifically any other positions related to that. What we have talked about, and again, this sort of it's probably more of a high school focus in this first example, is recognizing that a lot of our students need opportunities to have those paid internships. So when we talk about our partner with Avenue Scholars, we've got 50 students designated at our high schools that are engaging in not only coursework at the building level, but they've got a college and career coach that is through a partnership with Grandview, where they are, what is Grandview? Grandview? Did I say that right? we've got a couple different partnerships with universities. I want to say it's Grandview, where we've got a college and career coach at every high school that is supporting these students not only in their trajectory of whether it's post-secondary or straight into a career in tech field and a career right after high school, but we've got someone there that's helping them to coach them and mentor them through this while their families and them are discussing, what's my future going to be like and what do we want it to be like. So at the high school level, I would offer that we have that career coach investment now. So it's not articulated as a FY24 investment. This year is the first year for that position. So it's not articulated as an FY24 additional investment.
Right. So you're identifying that we lose our student recruitment or student retention issue is around not seeing a clear pathway forward.
Not seeing a clear pathway, but our best recruits for keeping students engaged are peers. They're peers themselves, right? It's very similar. I had a bus driver actually say this to me. All these years run together, this year or last year, but it was the retention bonuses are awesome. They're great. We appreciate that. But just want you to know that the best recruitment tool for bus drivers are current bus drivers. The current bus drivers are talking about what's happening and how rewarding this job is and how supported they are. That's going to bring folks into the position with that same sort of thought process behind student efficacy and career confidence around where they're moving forward to. What is that post-secondary? If they're filling out their ICANN plan, that Iowa College and Career Readiness Plan, and their friends know about it and they're talking about it, they're the best recruits to retain students because, like my son says, hey, I know one of my friends is actually in the aviation program. I want to be in the aviation program. I want to learn more about that. So that's some of the thinking behind the pathways for students and being engaged in honestly programming that nobody else will offer to keep kids here. Does that answer your question? I think I may have gotten off on a tangent on that.
Yeah, a little. I was just trying to understand make the connection in my brain
Gotcha.
of how us articulating appropriately career readiness is a root cause of our retention of families when you're saying that the hotspots are really elementary and sixth grade. I mean, I don't know my kids in fifth grade. I'm not really thinking about her career readiness right now, right? So that's what I was trying to make the connection, is that what you have identified as an issue is that we as a district have not articulated all of the great career readiness opportunity, and that's why you feel like we're losing students. I'm trying to just kind of dig in, and if that's
yes,
not,
as they matriculate through our system, it is. Other aspects of it, I appreciate what you're lifting up. Other aspects of it in terms of the elementary level, I think I just cut you off. I am sorry. And we talked about it the last time, our investments in additional pre-K, because sometimes we're losing students because they never actually join us in pre-K, and then we don't even get them in kindergarten. So, but we talked about that in terms of last week's or last work session's investments of pre-K, but also adding more Metro Kid sites. Part of the recruitment of families at the earlier grade levels is the recruitment of parents. Are we offering what they need in terms of full care during the day? And if we can't offer Metro Kids, and we've got wait lists right now in many respects, if we can't offer that, they will look elsewhere for a district that can meet those needs. And so those are also investments, but they were discussed more so last time and not on this one.
Okay, I think I'm on now. So when we talk about the pathways and the different that are available in the district, what's the limit and barriers? I mean, we can't have those programs for every child who wants to maybe go into aviation or go into whatever the culinary program, because there may not be enough spots. So do we have some barriers and challenges there that they are not available for all students? And are there wait lists, or, I mean, are there opportunities to grow if there is high demand?
Yeah, I think the barriers potentially are if we don't plan strategically to future think in terms of staffing. Because obviously, I mean, when we think about career technology, a lot of that time, we immediately go to the facility that we're sitting in because of the unique programming that we offer here. But that doesn't start here. That actually starts. It will start actually in terms of some of these conversations around. Have you thought about what it means to be a scientist? And did you know that there's food science, right? In third grade, right? There's that exploration and that sort of I'm missing the descriptive there, that awareness around excitement around just what it means to have someone show up at your building level that represents a career that we actually have a direct pathway for, whether it's a post-secondary pathway or a career and tech pathway. But I think the barrier to that, the potential barrier to that, is if we think that our current staffing is going to not evolve. It will have to evolve, right? And so that's what, and there's some legislation conversations here coming up as the last topic tonight, but that's where we talk about like, there is a real need to continue to work with legislators and policymakers around loosening some of those restrictions of Chapter 12 and making sure that we have more freedom to offer credits in a math credit in a food science class or a science credit in a food science. Like there's definitely the need to continue to have those conversations and have our staff be supported and evolve with the requests of parents and kids to be a part of this post-secondary opportunity or this career and tech opportunity that we offer and no one else in Iowa can offer.
And with that, do you see growth also being outside? I mean, yeah, the building we're sitting in is always the one my head goes to. But are we going to be able to create those opportunities in the comprehensive high schools too, so kids aren't having to travel here?
Yeah, I'll use like math as an analogy. The programs that we offer here are very unique. They're specialized, and we can't actually replicate a culinary arts classroom at all high schools. What we can offer are course pathways that lead students to that next step. And while we offer those and we have very clear opportunities in terms of paths to get there, we have to also at the same time shift and evolve our staffing to accommodate those requests from students. Because right now it's kind of restrictive in the idea that there's the traditional offerings, right? And that's not a negative. That there's really good offerings. There's the core classes. There's the extended core. There's so much more though that is available. But we have to be willing and ready and nimble to shift our staffing to make sure that we're providing those courses when they're requested as the marketing picks up and the campaigns begin at a very early age. So we got to be able to say, what are we going to be able to offer differently in sixth grade based on marketing to fifth graders in FY24? What is sixth grade course offerings and opportunities and programming going to look like in FY25 based on what we do in FY24? Because we're expecting students to engage in that thinking and those thought processes and want to be a part of that kind of program. So we need to change what we offer in sixth grade. What we can't do in terms of how we move forward is really offer a very clear pathway for students and families and then change nothing. That won't work. We can't say, hey, I'm glad you're super excited. I keep using food science because they're here and it's pie night. We can't offer that and then say, but in sixth grade, you get no access to any of that programming. We can't do that.
So a couple of things. I'm going to make a comment and then I'm going to suggest, even though we only have one section left, we've been sitting here for a few hours. So I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute break and then come back. But Matt, I really appreciate the comment you made about how we align, integrate, and front load those pathways for students earlier. I can't tell you how many kids that I've interacted with who would love to be in a program here, but because of the prerequisites, don't have the option of being able to participate because they missed that window. So really being intentional about how we better align earlier in a student's experience and create those opportunities along the way. You know, it doesn't put kids in a position where, oops, you missed it, so sorry, can't do it.
Right.
So I think that's really important. I also think that, to your point around how we sort of use this as a framing for recruitment, you know, there's nothing better, and you talk about it a lot, than storytelling. And who are the best storytellers? You know, our kids and our parents and those that have experienced the program. So it feels like we got to personalize it and put a face on it. It's not just about, you know, saying we do this and we do this and we do this, but we did this for this student, or we did this for this family. And it feels like that's the kind of messaging that begins to maybe help us distinguish who we are. Before we move on to the legislative overview, any other questions on this last segment? Maria?
You just expressed what I was thinking, and it was not in the form of a question earlier. So I appreciate you stating what you just stated. Actually, in my notes earlier, when we were talking about retention, I wrote testimonials because that's what makes it real for people.
Mhm.
And that's what gives us credibility. And that's what makes us attractive. And, you know, talk about, I think people being able to talk about why they came here and then what they became here would be an amazing story. I think it could touch a lot of people. I think it could convince a lot of people that this is the district to be in. We're not trying to be any other district. We're just trying to be the best that we can be for kids, for staff, for our community. And thank you for saying that, Madam Chair.
Yeah, if I could take the liberty just to double down on the storytelling of the testimonial, and I'll use an example of Jay Avant. Jay Avant is a 2021 graduate of Hoover High School. Jay is a realtor in Des Moines right now. Sold his first house in in January. Congratulations, Jay. And we offer entrepreneurial courses around real estate right now. Like and he'll tell you right now, I wish we had that. I know, I'm sorry that we didn't have it for you, but you're there now, and you're the testimonial that can actually come speak to our students. Because Jay identifies as a Black male, his career is in DMPS, and he's the one that we need on those vans and on those posters that says, I'm a Des Moines Public Schools graduate, and here's what I'm doing, and here's what you can do too. Like, this is a possibility. It creates hope, and it creates a contagious environment around students seeing their lives fall into place because of the programming that we offer. And so I'm doubling down on your statement around testimony. I think that's the word I've been missing that captures it. Our recruitment has to be about testimonials.
We'll reconvene at 7:30. I'm going to give you 10 minutes instead of 5.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So the last section for tonight's budget work session is the legislative overview. I'll turn it back over to Interim Superintendent Smith.
Thank you. Yes, so the first slide on your screen there and in your slide deck is things that we've discussed, things that we know about, the 3% SSA. We know that there's conversations regarding the property valuation rollback. There's some potential implications for that as well. I think she addressed that a little bit in the previous work session. Of course, the voucher program, there's still unknowns with that. We're trying to, project and predict how that's going to impact. Same thing with the flexibility provisions of the TLC. We know that that's been part of that voucher program as well. But in terms of the actual implications, we're still waiting on what that flexibility in terms of EE means for us as an organization. But we're watching it and we're in contact with folks about that. If we look at the next slide, this is I can't help but specifically to Senate File 251, because if you look at the price tag and potential implications on DMPS regarding that Senate file, it is a $33 million impact on us. And again, correct me if I misspeak on this. What that doesn't mean is that we lose $33 million. It means that those dollars are reallocated out of how the definition is defined right now at the State House in terms of administrative costs to go into. When we talk about investments in infrastructure of support, that could be potentially devastating to lose $33 million of infrastructure of support. And I think each of you may have received, if not, I can certainly get it to you, the percent of administrative cost for Des Moines Public Schools, which was, again, dependent on the definition, 1.3 to 1.6% of administrative costs in our budget. When you look at that, comparatively speaking, we're the lowest around, one of the lowest around in all districts, comparatively speaking. So it's not because we're administratively, in terms of cost, top heavy at all. When you look at those definitions, that's I don't know how to characterize it other than, and I can feel even my own tone getting softer and slower because that's devastating for us as an organization in terms of how we provide infrastructure of support to staff and to families and to kids.
I think the only thing I would add over here is the big change that has happened is the definition of admin expenses.
Right.
So here, the new definition which they're discussing, custodials, bus drivers, I mean, you name it, everyone is being put as part of admin. Yeah. And if you have to knock off $33 million, I don't know who's going to provide these services to the students. So this is gonna, and if you look at the total analysis for the state, at 5%, all 327 school districts are higher than 5%.
Yeah.
And if you have seen that report that was shared, this is going to impact everyone. Now, I agree, they have said that school districts with less than 1,000 students would not have to follow that rule. But any significant school district would be impacted by that.
Yeah, it's sort of counterintuitive when you think about
100%.
the implications, because it takes away your ability to be responsive to the needs of the whole child. If you can't transport, if you can't clean buildings, if you can't do all of the things that support what need to happen in a school district, it's insane. But I think the other thing too, and I hesitate to say this, but it also feels like piling on, if you will, when you think about what the legislature has already done relative to the voucher program, and is this one more thing that sort of brings us down? I don't know, but it just feels intentional. I'll leave it at that. Other comments about Senate File 251?
you'll see some other, again, some bills that we're tracking and asking questions of and trying to get more and more information. One that seems to come up year after year is the elimination of the Pearl levy. I don't know, Shashank, maybe you can speak to this more accurately. I don't know that that has any more traction than it has in years past, but it's definitely insignificant that it's a $1.1 million impact in terms of what that levy generates for us. And again, that's our education and recreation levy. And so it's, playgrounds and, again, infrastructure for kids is what that levy supports quite a bit. And anything I'm missing about that, Dave, specifically?
No, the big issue with Pearl is that there's an emphasis on community access. So we have some restrictions there in terms of how we can utilize that. But you're spot on with playgrounds, walking tracks, things that the community has access to.
We have restrictive funds, but this is probably one of the most restrictive funds that we have, even though it's a small dollar amount. The only change that is happening this year is now they're saying that it may not be a complete knockout in 1 year. It could be a phased knockout. So maybe in 25, they knock out 50%, 26, they knock out another 50% and make it zero. That is something new which is being discussed this year on Pearl levy.
Yep, and that's also, there's a handful of districts in the state that
27, I
actually,
think, actually.
yeah, that have that levy. So to your point, there's a feeling of a little bit of a pile on there.
Just a couple clarifications. So I want to make sure I understand the educational savings account, those would be 2024. So what, if any, financial impacts would there be to DMPS, either to the positive or the negative in this fiscal year?
None. It would be FY25.
Got it.
Thank you.
And then the follow-up is the transparency bucket. When you talk about impacting school finance, can you talk about what monetary implications that bucket might have? And then my other question is, and this may be more around risk mitigation, but should we find ourselves in need of legal support, is that a management fund expenditure? ?
And I'll let you answer that question. But part of your second question is the answer to the question around the transparency is risk mitigation, right? There's going to be some potential expenses in risk and mitigation as we talk about materials and what information is working with a third party at Infinite Campus and what information is stored on that particular software and all of the costs are going to be associated with changing, it's the technology term I'm looking for, changing the
both the reporting and the training requirements related to that. So that is going to be an integral part of the risk mitigation strategy that we'll have to adopt. There was some study that was done. I'm forgetting which group had done it. I don't know whether they've shared that with you or not. The potential impact to DMPS could run between $1.5 to $2 million to really implement it and execute on that.
And does that include impacts on teacher time as well when you think about it, or is that just technology and public access?
Go ahead.
It was more training costs,
Yeah.
so teacher time definitely, plus technology. Yeah. But again, Jackie, in all fairness, the devil is in the details.
Yep.
Yeah, well, and it's hard to place a monetary or a value of the add-on of that kind of a training on staff. So that's problematic.
And is that implementation this coming fiscal year?
I believe it is actually, yes.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
I had a quick question. The reference here to general obligation bonds and the 10% cash needed to issue GO bonds, that doesn't pertain to us because we don't use GO bonds and we don't anticipate doing that in the future, correct?
So we don't have it today. The reason why I bring it up is if we are consolidating and as part of the consolidation, we decide that we need to open a new additional facility. And then if we go for GO bonds, then we can raise 90%, 10% is the cash that we have to provide for that. That's the reason why I bring about.
So, but GO bonds also carries with it a referendum, correct?
In the sense of?
It would need to go to a vote of the people.
Without a doubt.
That's correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
I think majority 60%, I think
Mhm.
people have to support it.
Yep.
Yes, you're right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And again, the changes to the graduation requirements, training, endorsements, there would be some financial implications for that as well. That's why it's listed under a fiscal potential impact for us. That's it. I mean, that was the smallest section. The last slide is, of course, around some upcoming dates that we know. For example, I know our statement was sent to, property tax statement was sent to the register. That's going to
Last
be
Friday.
last Friday. That gets posted
This
this
Friday.
Friday. Thank you. And so as proposed tax rates, those things are all up. And that's when we come back in April, that's what we would be voting on, we'd be discussing. That's all I have for tonight.
So I'll defer to you, and then we'll go back around the horn.
I am going to compile my thoughts and send Matt and his team questions via email, and they'll be posted with the other questions, correct?
Yep. Sounds good. Kelly, anything else from you based on tonight's discussion or anything we've previously discussed that there's a revisit? I'm hoping that tonight we can get to closure and not need the 28th, and to the extent that there are additional questions from board members, they can memorialize those questions either in writing or set up a separate conversation with the superintendent to close those out. But I'm feeling like we've had some really good discussions, great information and content, and we might be ready to move towards closure. So
I would just ask, what's the date for questions to be submitted? At this point, I don't have anything right now, but I just want to know what that date is.
So I would say if you could get questions in by a week from Monday.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, a
Yeah,
week from
yeah.
this past Monday.
Yeah, and if any format that you would like, I'm happy to, respond and write it and post it with the other ones. I also want to continue to meet and talk about it. That's also helpful for me to have the dialogue and the conversation as opposed to just the email itself. Those are great, and I appreciate the questions that have already come in.
Okay.
But I'd be happy if we don't have another. I'll just put it like this: if we don't have another budget work session, I've got more time to meet rather than prepping for a budget work session.
That's almost an incentive, Matt. Like,
I'm
if we
just-
don't have to have a budget session again.
Want to offer
it's
that
like-
up.
Right.
So I would offer that follow-up questions, either in writing to Matt or personal conversations, in writing by the 27th, personal conversation, maybe through the week of the 27th,
Sure. Okay.
in anticipation of our April 4th session.
Right. I want to lift up Matt, though, to you and your team in putting together this plethora of conversations, I should say. And it's been extremely helpful to understand the budget, better understand the budget, and how you propose allocating the funds moving forward. So thank you to you and your team and everybody who's put the time and effort into this process. I appreciate it.
Jenna?
No questions at this time. I echo my thanks to you and the team for this presentation.
Kim, anything else?
Thank you.
Dewana?
No, I just echo the sentiments of everyone too, of just making it very clear, especially making the alignment to our goals and guardrails. So I appreciate the team's work. I appreciate your work as well.
Of course, I have questions.
Sure.
And no surprise. I echo, yeah.
How about this?
Yep.
In the interest of time, Jackie, would you mind advancing your questions to Matt either electronically or in person.
I'd actually, this one, can I ask? Because I think it is
Okay.
important enough.
Okay.
The sessions have been great. I think if you could just lay out for us, how this is all being pulled back together. Because when we started, we were at a $12.2 million deficit. There was discussion about consolidations. And I would like to understand how the loop is being closed on those things. And I think the follow-up to that is, we know each year our budget situation may become more dire. And I am curious, I don't want to lose sight of the investments in how the demographic study may inform future school consolidations. We have to do prep work to be ready to do those types of things. And I just don't want to lose sight of long-term planning in the budget. So maybe just understanding the arc of where we are, and because we don't want to be surprised by programmatic cuts that happen, should that be the case.
So two things that I would offer, and maybe I'll allow Matt to maybe speak a little bit about closing the loop. However, we do know there's mission critical information that is yet to come. So we're still waiting on the DMB, we're still waiting on the DMTRS, we're still waiting on the other D demographic study. So there are other pieces that we likely need to circle back to and close out on. But also moving forward, I think our process has been one that sort of looks down the road and tries to anticipate what's ahead. With all of the things that happened in the legislature this year, it's even more important for us to really create a grand vision and sort of understand the implications of not only legislation, the demographic study, but other factors that we know are going to impact the district. So what I'd like to suggest is maybe in that third and fourth quarter, maybe the third quarter of this year, we start laying out some of those things and begin to be intentional about how we queue up that information. So it's not just presented during the budget, it's presented in anticipation of the budget. So we sort of know where we're going, and we have a better understanding of the challenges and the opportunities that are ahead. So I'll plan to work with Kim and Shashank and Matt on sort of doing a little roadmap that I think helps us to sort of get ahead and always stay ahead of some of those things, if that works.
Yeah, I think I want to make sure that there is money set aside in the budget for some of the things that we've said are important. We've all, I think over the course of the year, talked about programmatic ROI. We've talked about it now taking the demographic study and overlaying what, if any, consolidations need to take place. And everything I've heard is that's a third-party consultant. And so I guess I just want to make sure that in our budget, we're setting aside money for whatever process we need to undergo to have those types of serious conversations
You bet.
Next year.
Is that your one main question?
That's my
you
one
wanted
main
to get out?
question. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Ms. Alonso.
I just want to echo also what several of my colleagues have shared, pero en español. Thank you for the work that you've put in your team, for trying to make things more transparent for us, and in a way that is understandable. And thank you. Thank you for all the work. Muchas gracias por todo el trabajo que ha hecho usted y su equipo en tratar de mantener esto transparente y también presentarlo de una manera que es entendible para nosotros. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. I want to make sure I hit, there's several folks in the audience, but there's also, Rosie's been incredible. Cassandra Christian has been amazing. There's lots of folks that are not actually, some of them are here tonight. I'd be remiss if I didn't actually lift them up and all their, lots of time. So thank you for recognizing and celebrating the team.
Thanks. Just as a reminder, there are a few closeout questions that were on here, and I'll circle back to Matt and Shashank to make sure that those receive
We're filling
the
those out.
appropriate responses. March 27th, for those of you that intend to submit questions in writing, deadline. The week of March 27th, for those of you that wish to meet with Matt to get responses to any additional questions. That means we will not have a budget work session on the 28th, if there's consensus on that. However, we will have a closed session on the 28th, and I'm going to poll folks to see if our meeting time might be able to be moved up that day, so it's not as late in the evening. So just know you'll get an email, and Rosie, I'll circle back to you once we have our time scheduled. So I just want to, again, echo all of the comments of my board colleagues. I've been on this board for longer than I want to admit, but this is actually one of the best budget sessions I have participated in. Not only because it was content rich, but we were able to have the right kinds of conversations at this table that I think set us up not only for the future, but allow us to be thoughtful about how we create the right sort of framework for the district moving forward. So thank you, Matt and team. And with that, we're adjourned.